Well, that couldn't have gone any worse for the New Orleans Saints, and it couldn't have gone any better for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's time for a live postcast episode of Locked On Bucs and Locked On Saints. We're never going to roll an intro here because we're kind of sending this to both sides, and I'm going to be honest, the Saints don't deserve for me to play my music.
You know, I mean, if I were in your shoes, I would agree as well. And like Tom Brady said, just how they drew it up. This was the game plan. I think that's what we're supposed to believe is, you know what? Early lead, let them have it. Last 5 minutes, guys.
Yeah.
We'll come back and get it.
Oh, yeah. I buy that. I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. This is David Harrison, host of Locked On Bucs. Here to kind of recap, break down, react to this 17-16 win for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, loss for the New Orleans Saints, absolutely abysmal loss for the New Orleans Saints because it wasn't just a loss, David, it was a blown lead, 13-point lead for the New Orleans Saints by the time the Tampa Bay Buccaneers took the final two possessions over, starting at 5 minutes and 21 seconds. What did Tom Brady do right in those last two drives?
I mean, Tom Brady did what Tom Brady does, right?
Mm-hmm.
He read the defense. He said, okay, the Saints are going to double this guy. You're going to double Mike. So I'll go to, Julio. You're going to double Julio, so I'll go to Chris. You're going to double Chris, I'll go to Scotty, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know that the storyline here is really what did Tom do right, even though obviously Tom's going to get all the credit. If you go to Locked On Bucs, Tom Brady is the thumbnail and all these things. What really it boils down to is what did Todd Bowles finally stop doing wrong? And that is he's stopping Tom Brady. And we've been having this conversation
We talked about that on the crossover.
A lot. We talked about it on the crossover, exactly. And that is what we finally saw at the end of this game. And then what you see is just a nice, heavy passing attack and Tom Brady kind of picking his spots and choosing where he's going to throw the ball. And his playmakers coming up and making plays for him, including the rookie Rachaad White, who actually fumbled earlier and helped the New Orleans Saints take the lead that they had going into the final stretch of the game.
Yeah, I'm going to see, I have a theater background, so I'm going to yes and your idea around like, what did Todd Bowles stop doing wrong? And I want to talk about what it is that Dennis Allen continues to do wrong. And I think for me, like, this is the biggest indictment on Dennis Allen as a head coach so far that we have seen throughout what has been a very, very tough season. Listen, I've been speaking to you, if you're watching over the Locked On Saints side, I've been talking to you over and over again about how the New Orleans Saints season isn't quite over, like expect this team to continue to compete and all that. None of that was fictitious. None of that wasn't true. But you all also know that I was very much not confident about this team toward the latter half of the season and where we've been. I picked the Saints to lose this game by 1 point, by the way. And it was very much like that they would have a lead and that Tom Brady would bring them back and then have sort of that game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the reason why this is such a big indictment on Dennis Allen and for you as a New Orleans Saints fan when you're looking at Dennis Allen is that this is supposed to be a defensive team. Yeah. Defense is supposed to be the bread and butter. Yeah. And what lost this game? The defense. Now, the offense, of course, once again struggled to put points on the board, but that's not new for this New Orleans Saints team. That's not new for an Andy Dalton-led offense, right? So for me, like, that was kind of the biggest takeaway when it comes to what that blown lead meant for the New Orleans Saints and means moving forward.
And then that's kind of what the confusing part is. So we've talked about this before, and then of course we've had some side conversations, not on the air, that I'll share kind of my view of it. And I mentioned to a Bucs fan who is more of a Jameis Winston fan than he is a Bucs fan, so was rooting for the Saints tonight, even though Jameis was not going to play. And I said, you know what, honestly, this is the perfect Jameis Winston game. Yeah. Honestly. And it's the perfect game because the Buccaneers secondary was wounded. They're missing 3 key defensive players. One of the defensive starters, safety Logan Ryan, veteran, talented guy, but it's his first game back off of IR. So, I mean, there's expected to be a little bit of rust there. Yeah. Keanu Neal, I mean, Saints fans have been seeing him with Falcons for years. You know what his coverage skill is. It's nothing. So this just kind of felt like a game where Jameis can come in here, and if Andy Dalton did enough Andy Dalton things, which honestly he had a relatively good game.
Not bad, honestly.
Even though he's going to carry now a 13-game primetime losing streak out of this, and everybody's going to make fun of him for that. But this just kind of felt like a game where a Jameis Winston approach could possibly help the Saints do some things. And when you come down to it, I mean, 3 seconds left when Rachaad White sticks that ball in the end zone, and then you get the Ryan Suckup extra point. If the Saints get a first down in one of those final 2 possessions that they end up having, the game's probably over.
And that's where you look at and you kind of point and you say, okay, that's a turning point for this game. Mark Ingram runs out of bounds 1 yard short of a first down. Granted, he hurt his knee, and that's or had a leg injury of some sort, and that's what prompted him to run out of bounds and not take the hit. But even outside of that, you have the following play, they throw a slant on 3rd and 1 as opposed to going to the guy that they just refused to go to on 3rd and 1. So I did the research and I broke it all down in terms of the usage of 3rd and 1s since the Las Vegas Raiders game. And so 3rd in kind of 0 to 3, Taysom Hill's carried the ball once so far in the past 4 weeks. That's one of the reasons why they have been so just bad when it comes to 3rd downs. They haven't converted more than 4 3rd downs in a game since that Raiders game, today being the exception. So I think that when you look at where the Saints went wrong in this one, it was a lot of play calling. Yeah. It was a lot of decision making. Andy Dalton taking a 2nd down sack when you only have a practice squad wide receiver in Kirk Merritt, who I think is incredibly talented, but this was his first game in. He was the only wide receiver that ran a route. They were trying to do something tricky and get Taysom Hill on a 7, and it just didn't work because Tampa Bay's defense is good. Yeah. And so, like if you're a New Orleans sports fan, what you're used to seeing right now is the Pelicans winning. And you know why the Pelicans win? Because their biggest playmakers have the ball in their hands when the game matters most. Yeah. The New Orleans Saints, they've been taking their biggest playmakers off the field, and I can't figure out why.
And what I like about the Buccaneers tonight is we saw the return of some younger playmakers. Now, Rachaad White has obviously been carving out his role with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and has been doing so for a few weeks now, but Cade Otton is a guy, and Locked On Bucs listeners and viewers, you're gonna know James Yarcho loves him. Some Cade Otton tweeted when Cameron Bray was officially identified as inactive. He tweeted Cade Otton season or something on Twitter. So he loved that touchdown. You'll hear all about that from James on tomorrow's episode, I'm sure. But there's a valid reason for that as well, because you go back to the comeback against the Rams, and Rachaad White, Cade Otton, Scotty Miller even had very critical roles in that comeback. And you go to Seattle, you go to Germany, the game against Seattle, and again, the younger Bucs, the kind of lesser known Buccaneers are getting involved. Then you go to Cleveland, and it's almost like this coaching staff said, okay, we're just going to completely forget about those guys, other than Rachaad White, who's obviously starting in place of Leonard Fournette, who missed the game. But other than Rachaad, it's like, okay, we're just going to completely go away from that. And I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit concerned today. So we saw Rachaad White get involved early. Yeah. First 4 carries were his. First 5 total targets. He had a target that wasn't a catch. Were his, and then Lenny came in, finished off the first drive, and then Lenny came in for the second drive. I was like, okay, let's see, is this coaching staff now going to ride Fournette? Right. And now Rachaad White ends up on the sideline, and then Rachaad had the fumble, and this coaching staff, granted, BA is not the head coach anymore, but this coaching staff as a group is notorious for putting a guy down when he fumbles and putting him on the bench, saying, okay, cool your heels. But they bring him back in. You see Cade Otton get the late touchdown. Rachaad White gets the go-ahead, leads to the go-ahead score there. So I love seeing the fact that this coaching staff has kind of returned to using those younger guys, and hopefully, even when Cam is healthy, even as Leonard Fournette gets healthier, and even though Julio's on the field now, we see more Scotty, we see Rachaad continue his workload, we see Cade Otton continue to get involved in the offense.
Yeah, coaching staff's obviously a huge topic of conversation for both of these franchises.
Entire division.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, really across the entire division. But we're going to discuss coaching staffs here because the public view of Todd Bowles, the public view of Dennis Allen, where does that end up going next? And we'll kind of look across the division at one another. Before we get to that, I want to tell you today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. If you're looking for a place to look for a job, LinkedIn is always the place that you go. It's where I used to go up until I got a nice cushy job thanks to David Locke. And if you're looking to hire, you can go to LinkedIn as well, because LinkedIn Jobs allows you to post your job for free. They also offer you things like screening questions, stuff like that, to make sure that you're getting those quality candidates that you're looking for and that you're getting to talk to them even faster. Making sure that you're doing things like you can put the little hashtag hiring frame on your photo to make sure that folks know that you are indeed hiring and have some openings. So go ahead and check them out. This is the business that small businesses rank number 1 when it comes to returning quality candidates versus all of those leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs is going to help you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And today's episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Audible. Oh, we love us some Audible, because right now Audible, did you know, has a brand new whole slate of new football podcasts that you're going to love. And that's why I want you to go and check out a sneak peek of Block Forever, which is actually available on the Locked On NFL podcast right now over on the Odyssey side. Block Forever is a brand new podcast that is hosted and presented by former NFL All-Pro Ryan Khalil, as well as Audible. He sits down with star players, coaches, executives, pros all across the league, to talk about kind of real conversations in terms of what happens in terms of player psyche, managing your relationship with tough players, tough personalities, things like that, even kind of sports betting, fantasy football. Christian McCaffrey tells you all about how much he hates it, all that good stuff. So lots of really great stuff because nothing is out of bounds when it comes to the Block Forever podcast. Head over to Locked On NFL to get your sneak peek of Block Forever or catch the full series available anywhere that you get your podcast, available everywhere. Now, Audible, get in the game. All right, David, so as we continue to look at this, Ross Jackson here, Locked On Saints, David Harrison, Locked On Bucs. To wrap this up, the coaching staffs, obviously they're going to be the big-time conversation as you observe throughout the entire division. How does this win for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers help Todd Bowles, or is there still some shakiness there with the decision to punt on 4th and 7, for instance?
Yeah, so let's go, and it's literally right out here, guys.
Right.
The 40-yard line is right out here. 4th and 7. You have more time on the clock than you had when you won the game, so that's kind of going to bleed into this conversation here. But Todd Bowles decides 4th and 7. You're at the New Orleans 40. You're down 2 scores, and he decides to punt. And the Bucs fans in Raymond James Stadium, the Bucs side was shocked. You guys were shocked.
Yeah.
Fans were shocked. Tom Brady was probably shocked. Everybody was shocked, except for Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles is the only guy in the stadium not shocked by that decision.
I'll tell you, I was standing, actually, shout out to Jason. I was standing with Jason by the pirate ship when they made the call, and the amount of expletives that rained out from all of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans was impeccable.
I believe it. And then you come down later, and now you're in your own end, and you end up with 4th, and I can't remember the exact yardage on it, but 4th and long, right? 4th and long. And I think everybody in the building is kind of thinking the same thing. Like, you don't want to go for it here, but you kind of have to because you're under 8 minutes. You're down 13, right? Like we talked to, leading to the 5-minute deal.
Yep.
And instead, he punts. But the thing that I didn't like about it the most is, if you're going to punt, fine. If that's who you're going to be and you're going to say, look, defense will get us the ball back so we have a chance to win this thing, fine. But be who you're going to be.
Right.
What I didn't like was the hesitation. There was there was a gap there between the decision, and to me that shows hesitation. And we're in week 13. Todd Bowles, this is his second stint as an NFL head coach.
Right.
You've been in these situations. You know your team. You should know who you want to be as a coach. You should know your approach to these games and these moments. And it felt like to me that Todd was kind of like, well, I want to do this, but I want to do this, but I want to do this, blah, blah. And just, okay, you know what, we're going to do this one. And that's not really a solid way to make a decision.
Right.
Now it works out. And here's the bad news, right? So the good news, Bucs fans, is the Buccaneers won. The bad news is the Buccaneers won, and Todd Bowles now is justified in the way that he approached this game. And he was asked in his post-game press conference about the 4th down situations, and he immediately steered towards the one in his own end and said, well, if we go for it on 4th and we don't get it, which is very likely, they score a field goal, we lose. And he didn't go on and continue saying it. So basically what he wanted to continue saying was, so I was right, guys.
Yeah.
And my concern is now you got San Francisco next week.
Yeah.
Another tough defense. I mean,
Brock Purdy season.
Brock Purdy, legendary quarterback. You know what I mean? But you have a coach who is now vindicated.
Yeah.
In this soft, sheltered approach to trying to win a game. And I just feel like it's going to bite the Buccaneers in the butt at the worst possible time.
Yeah.
Against San Francisco wouldn't be the worst possible time. But at the worst possible time, I think this is going to continue to be a trend, and that is what's going to frustrate Bucs fans and everybody else watching this team.
Yeah. Before I get on my soapbox about Dennis Allen and the New Orleans Saints coaching staff, just from an exterior perspective, what do you see?
So the question I asked you today before the game started, is Dennis Allen's job in jeopardy from a New Orleans media standpoint, and even a Saints fandom standpoint, since obviously you're a lot more plugged in to them than I am. But and your answer is not really. The general consensus that he will be back next year. And I think it's interesting because on the outside, we all kind of look at that. I can't speak for everybody, but I'm going to say generally speaking, we all, and for what it's worth, right, cover the Bucs, cover the Commanders. We've got a little bit of multiple beats going on here. That these are some really bad coaching decisions.
Oh, yeah.
And namely, it's the quarterback. And the head coach quarterback relationship, as everybody knows, is the most important one in football.
Yep.
And you've got a talented quarterback in Jameis Winston. I understand that talent comes with a warning label. I got it. But Andy Dalton's talent comes with a warning label of don't take while driving because you might fall asleep. Right?
He's the drowsy medication. I love that.
That's kind of the way.
I love that.
That's kind of the way I look at this.
Meanwhile, Jameis is kind of like, don't take this too late because you'll have a good time.
Right.
Like that's really what I feel like is
you know who else is that way?
Who?
Taylor Heineke.
Taylor Heineke.
Of the winning record NFC East Washington Commanders, 8th place in the playoffs.
And you know who else puts me to sleep? Carson Wentz. They made the right decision in Washington. And so, like, sorry, continue.
No, but that's kind of the point. Is like,
I'm here to get my jokes off.
Who's better for a team? Is it the guy that has the most talent, or is the quarterback that inspires the team better? Is it the general who knows all the knowledge and the regulations the best, or is it the general that makes the soldiers want to go out and fight?
Yeah.
I would argue that if you have to pick between the two, if those are your clear delineations, I would argue that the one who inspires the troops, that's the one you want on the field.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We were told that the reason that the Saints decided to go forward with Andy Dalton is because they were moving the ball and they were putting points on the board. We have not seen that consistently since that statement was made. And that statement, by the way, was also made after a 3-interception game at the end of a second half against the Arizona Cardinals. So when I look at where this New Orleans Saints coaching staff is, I tend to also believe that Dennis Allen will have a second year next year, but it is not, that's not me saying that I want it to be that way or that I think that it should be that way. It's not about my feelings, right? My feelings don't really matter. I just know this organization. I know that they love their continuity. I love that they love their loyalty. I will tell you that some key people were very upset with this loss.
Yeah.
That is the most that I can say about that. But some key people were very, very upset about this. So maybe things kind of sway and change based upon this loss, considering that the identity of this team was supposed to be what Dennis Allen is best at as a fantastic defensive coordinator, all of that stuff. So when I look at the New Orleans Saints coaching staff, I think one way or another, some kind of overhaul happens this offseason. Yeah. And this is I hope that this is interesting to you as Bucs fans too, those of you that are seeing this over on the Bucs side, because that changes what this NFC South can be. I mean, that means that it effectively enters a little bit of a rebuild mode for the New Orleans Saints. Now they're still going to have a lot of the same players because contracts, restructures, things like that. But I think you're going to see a bit of an overhaul in the coaching staff, even if it's not at the head coach.
Right.
I think you can't say that Pete Carmichael gets a second year next year. That's an argument that I cannot make. And then once Sean Payton ends up coming back into the league, he takes Ryan Nielsen very likely with him. So there's going to be changes at least the coordinator spots. But I'm at a point now to where I would very confidently say that if the Saints did surprise me and say, okay, we're going a different direction, maybe they just decide that it's a philosophical change, they want to go to an offensive head coach as opposed to a defensive head coach, I would be pleased to hear that, because at this point, or not pleased, let me not say it that way, but like I wouldn't be surprised, right? Like it would be a decision that makes a ton of sense to me, because I don't think you can look at this game, the play calls, the decision making, the defensive side of this that's supposed to be the strongest side of it, and make a positive argument in favor of Dennis Allen. I do believe this is the biggest indictment on him so far in his first year as a head coach for the Saints.
Absolutely, and I was listening to the pregame on my way to the stadium because I flew into Tampa and drove straight to the stadium. So I had it playing on my phone, but just for safety purposes, I was listening, not watching the pregame. And RG3 and Steve Young were actually having this very conversation. And I want to say it was Steve Young who brought up the fact of so this isn't a new idea, right? But, which quarterback kind of gives you the best spark of energy. And they mentioned that defensive coaches most often kind of don't have their finger on the pulse of what it really means to be a quarterback in a locker room and on a roster. And you talk about Dennis Allen, look at Washington, they bring in Carson Wentz. Who's the better quarterback for Washington? Not who's the most talented, but who's the better one. Ron Rivera's the defensive head coach as well.
Yeah.
Tom Brady, we're talking about him being bottled up. Todd Bowles is the defensive head coach as well. And I'm not saying defensive coaches should stop getting head coaching jobs.
No.
But I just think maybe the defensive coaches out there need to have like a seminar in the offseason and talk to some of these Steve Youngs and maybe the Troy Aikmans and some of these legendary quarterbacks and kind of educate them on what it really means to be a quarterback, because it's not just about arm angles and and how deep you can throw the ball and whether you plant your feet in the right distance underneath you when you go to throw. There's more into being a quarterback than all those things. And those are the things that these defensive coaches honestly seem to be missing.
Yeah. I really enjoyed Jason, who I was having a conversation with earlier, mentioned that, like, if you're a defensive head coach, you can almost pick the quarterback based upon which one you wouldn't want to play against, which one you wouldn't want to game plan against. And I have a hard time believing that any defensive coordinator out there would rather game plan for Jameis Winston than game plan for Andy Dalton. Yeah. I think in 10 times out of 10, you'd rather game plan for Andy Dalton.
Absolutely.
And so to me, that's an easy barometer. I love that point by Jason. So
for all I mean, and that's by the way, I'm loving this mixed Locked On Bucs, Locked On Saints chat. This is amazing. and 100%, because for everything that Jameis can be negatively, and Bucs fans are very, very familiar with that.
Sure.
There's a lot that he can also be that's dangerous to you
Yeah.
and go against you as an opponent. So, that's So I think that's a very valid point too. Is which quarterback would you rather face? And Bucs would rather face Andy Dalton, and they did, and they beat him.
And that's how it worked out. Y'all, we appreciate you so much for taking the time to join us for this live postcast episode of Locked On Bucs, Locked On Saints. Thank you very much to the over 200 people that were here in the chat at a 1 a.m. Eastern time show. So thank you so much for coming through. And for those of you that are catching later, we love you as well. For David Harrison, I'm Ross Jackson. I'll say it for both of us. If you see us, say hi.
Absolutely. The pirate on the ship.
That's
As
right.
we were on the ship
Said
earlier before the game, said, Locked On Bucs. And
Yeah.
I was like, that's good stuff.
Yeah, I don't care if I'm eating. I don't care where I am. Say hi. It's totally fine. Shout out to Jason. Shout out to Yancey for saying hi today. Everything. Such a pleasure to see all of you. And it's going to be a pleasure to be back with you again.
Chris is not Andy's
tomorrow.
friend.
Chris is not Andy's
And
friend.
not Andy's
at all. Woof. Y'all, we really appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. Make sure you keep it locked on Bucs, Locked On Saints every Monday through Friday, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.